Hello, I'm Cameron, and today I'm joined with Cyprian today, and we're going to debate and discuss the view that ethics get in the way when practicing sports psychology. How are we doing today, Cyprian?
Hi, nice to see you. All good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good, thank you.
So I was thinking maybe just to start, you could tell us a little bit about the history of ethics in sports psychology.
Sure, for sure. Um, Although pieces of sports psychology can be traced back to hundreds of years ago, most research on the subject area does not become evident until the late 1800s with Norman Triplett in 1898. From this, we can see that compared to other areas of sports science, the field is relatively new. And due to its use, it's understandable to be exposed to ethical obstruction or implications, as it may not be as ironed out as other sports science disciplines. To put this into perspective, the International Society of Sports Psychology, or the ISSP, was born in 1965, and the first applied sports psychologists were not officially employed until the 1890s with the US Olympic Committee. On the other hand, it's true that compared to societies such as the International Union of Physiological Sciences, which was founded in 1929, the ISSP is considerably younger. However, it was established to be the registry that represents the minimum standard of psychological practice. This is not only for those present at that time of creation, but to direct all sports psychologists for years to come, to move with the times and adapt their ethics to fit this. The ISSP's ethics may have been created in the late 1900s, but they have been created around and taken inspiration from the British Psychological Society's Code of Conduct, which has been around from the start of the 19th century. Not only that, but it's been reviewed, revisited, just constantly made sure to fit with the changes in the times. The most recent revision coming in 2009.
An important issue within sports psychology is the prevalence of pseudo-psychologists who pretend to have the required qualifications to work and practice sports psychology. From mental coaches to performance psychologists, there is a range of names used by these, let's call them usurpers, to convince the general public of their expertise. The principal issue is that these pseudo experts put their clients' health at risk. To protect the clients, there is now a precise way to be chartered by the different authorities. In the UK, the BPS, British Psychology Society, and BASIS, British Association for Sports and Exercise Science. The first required qualification is a bachelor or equivalent in psychology, followed by two stages and a registration. Stage one is a master's degree in sports psychology. Stage two is either a doctorate, or a minimum of 2 years working in the field as an independent training route. After these two stages, the practitioner is finally eligible for registration with the Health Professions Council, the HPC. Only after going through all these steps can one use the titles sport psychologist or exercise psychologist legally. Sorry. The reason for which they made it so complicated is that the athlete's health is at risk, and there are certain rules and guidelines registered professionals have to follow in order to practice sport psychology. One of the main sets of rules is the respect of ethical considerations. The authorities are currently working on prosecuting individuals who are guilty of illegally calling themselves sports or exercise psychologists. Richard Keegan explains in his book from 2016 that there are 13 key ethical considerations. such as competence, confidentiality, multiple relationships, informed consent, etc. They are recurrent to uh, that are recurrent to different codes of conduct, such as the Association of Applied Sport Psychology (AASP), the American Psychological Association (APA), and the British Psychological Society (BPS), and such. Our question today is: do these ethical considerations get in the way of practicing sport psychology, or are they only guidance to ensure the athletes, the practitioners, and the profession's well being? The main reason behind the ethical considerations is to avoid harming the client, the reputation of the job, and the psychologist while ensuring beneficence and non maleficence. After all, the role of the sports psychologist completely revolves around the client and the athlete. Therefore, ensuring their safety is crucial. It is often pointed out that confidentiality and data protection can get in the way of practicing sport psychology. What if, for example, the coach wants a very detailed report of each meeting? However, the athlete insists on keeping the matter discussed confidential, maybe because he's complaining about the coach, maybe he's saying something he doesn't want anyone to know. If the coach is the client, the one paying for the service, does that entitle a breach in confidentiality? Does that explain a reason for which people shouldn't follow ethics? What if the coach decides to pay only if he receives complete records of the meetings? Does the pay explain a breach? Well, the best and probably only solution to avoid such issues is to ensure a clear understanding of the rules and to manage expectations from each party before any psychological support is provided. A good illustration would be the first party, the psychologist in this case, providing for a second party, in our case, the client or athlete, which is all at the request of the third party, the coach or parent. Before the onset of psychological support, the psychologist must clarify his role and the boundaries, how the collected information will be used, the nature of his relationship with each party involved, as well as the limits to confidentiality and the financial agreement.
A great part of the protection of confidential information is the aspect of record keeping. Record keeping is essential when conducting psychological studies, not only for the protection of clients and respect for their privacy, but also for the future research that is consented to by the participants. But to accurately record all situations that occur is quite difficult, even when working just for one athlete. Trying to keep all the data of one full club is almost impossible to do alone. And because of this requires additional funding, additional manpower, and even training, which can be seen to get in the way of a psychologist practitioner. The quality of this work, because of these, may be lesser than that of the work conducted by the original psychologist if he was to do it himself, and can lead to a deterioration of the final product. Not only this, but psychologists might also keep a record of the rules, regulations, and objectives held by the club and athlete, and that they're working to complete and work for that pleases the employer.
Name dropping and using past experience to advertise services would be an efficient way to gather clients and grow a healthy and long lasting business. However, it would be a breach of confidentiality as well as a conflict of interest. This could be seen as a way in which ethics stands in the way of practicing sport psychology. The practitioner prioritizes his business above the confidentiality and trust of his past or current clients. In most, if not all cases, the psychologist must drop his own interest to fully prioritize the athletes. As soon as his own interests, such as unethical advertising or any type of unexpected relationship with any party involved, stands in the way, the ethical code is breached, and it could come to termination of role. Advertising your services in sports psychology is strictly ruled by guidelines to respect past clients and the industry. Selfishly, it could be seen as something holding each practitioner back. However, in the bigger picture, the advertisements end up being realistic and not misleading to the public. Advertising or marketing statements made by psychologists may strictly not contain any false statements or testimonials from past or current clients. It should not include any statements implying superiority over colleagues, nor statements that could lead to unjustified or unrealistic expectations, nor unjustified claims of superior equipment or techniques, and finally, no statements that could disserve or disrepute the profession of sports psychologists.
Along with advertising, as Cyprian just said, determination of the role is quite a controversial ethic principle. This is the understanding of when the practitioner has aided the client to the best of their ability or to the best they physically can, and has reached a place where they no longer are the best point of contact for them. And the introduction of a new member of staff may be the best action for the client. For example, someone that can help them out in a more specific role in psychology or has greater experience in this person's certain criteria. This literally gets in the way of the psychologist being able to practice their field of work, as they need to find a new client and place of work if they make the client aware of these circumstances themselves, because they are the ones that have to tell them. The client won't tell them they've outdone their welcome. Ethically, it is the correct thing to do to the best interest of the client, but maybe not to oneself.
Sport psychologists end up facing unique challenges. A big recurring challenge is location of services. Where does the meeting or the service take place? Ideally, the meeting and discussion occur in a private office. However, in sport psychology, this is more often than not impossible, and the meetings end up happening in the training facilities, changing rooms, team bus rides, dinner tables, or other not so private places. This lack of privacy can create issues of confidentiality, personal conduct, and conflict of interests. What is the right thing to do? How should the practitioner handle the situation? On one hand, it is highly beneficial for psychologists to be available at all times. On the other hand, it can quickly become an issue, depending on who can hear the discussion. Another recurring issue would be to drop hints and breach confidentiality without meaning to. An example would be an athlete jokingly saying in a public setting to another player in his team, maybe you should see the psychologist, so it's whether it be because he played badly or any other reason. Other people around might hear and look at the psychologist to see his reaction, which could give away some knowledge or data considered confidential, like, for example, the fact that the player is already seeing the psychologist. Any information is confidential. Another recurring challenge for sports psychologists is time limitations. Haberl and Pearson in 2006 explained that often sports psychologists have day jobs, it being studying or working as a lecturer or researcher, which means it is impossible for them to spend substantial hours with a team. On a busy training schedule, the sports psychologist is extremely limited in time. However, they spend time around the team during tours or training, merely hanging out, which could lead to the question Anderson brought up in 2005. What counts as a billable hour? How many contact hours is the expert paid for? Little and Harwood in 2010 point out that the little amount of time available for meetings forces the practitioner to talk to athletes in evening slots or meal times, which could be considered a breach of ethical considerations. This shows the existence of a slippery slope towards being lenient and allowing situations that could be viewed as ethical violations.
Competing biases are constantly present in the ethical reasoning. so many affect the way we make decisions or give advice, it is obvious they would play a role in interfering with psychological practices. To name a few, confirmation bias, which is the tendency to look for evidence that supports your beliefs and to ignore other information. This is becoming more and more prevalent in recent times due to the availability of research through the internet. Compared to previous years or times where our parents grew up, to find information, you have to trek to the library and find information that has been highly reviewed and highly referenced and published to the library. If you have a thesis you want to support now, simply all you have to do is Google it, and you can find multiple sources that agree with your point, multiple sources of media, and just pieces of information that might not be as accurate as scholarly references. In addition to this, confirmation bias is not only seen online, but also in person, in real life. With the emergence of pseudos, as we spoke about earlier, obtaining roles in the industry illegally, the mentorship they serve to those under them can lead to those individuals being falsely informed and having poorly translated lessons due to the belief that this person is a place of higher authority and they must be correct, even when they have incorrect qualifications. Loss aversion, or the behavior that is produced to prevent the possible occurrence of failure. This means the individual will choose a behavior that is not most likely to result in a loss, and will sacrifice the possible result of success or something else, such as losing, but learning a really important lesson from that loss. Loss aversion is a general human tendency, but some of us are more inclined to loss aversion than others. Another reason, another bias we see is a belief of self-disclosure. This is a tendency to be more honest when one believes that actions will be known by others. Knox and Hill in 2003 believed self-disclosure could only have a detrimental effect on the client, and it was best to avoid revealing this personal information. This was then agreed with by Harmel in 2010, that self-disclosure irrevocably contaminates and damages the therapeutic process. With all biases, the way they affect different individuals will always differ, and the reaction they elicit from clients will also be unique. In conjunction with this, Joyce and Sills in 2014 identified more favorable responses coming from their therapist self-disclosure with clients perceiving it with more positive regard when it was related to a significant event, or when normalizing it to their own experiences, generating a positive model for change in one's behavior. However, just because these biases are present, it doesn't make opinions wrong. Sometimes the biases give us the most truthful perspectives. If we worry too much about biases, we shape ourselves in someone else's perspective. Therefore, as the British Psychological Society Code of Conduct states, it is important that we consider these effects and acknowledge their presence in our decision making. Following the Code of Conduct to the degree will not provide every answer to ethical issues. We're trying to identify it, but we will provide the parameters. Following ethical issues, we're trying to identify, will provide the parameters within the professional judgment that should be made.
So to conclude, it is apparent that the ethical regulations set in place by the multiple sport psychology societies play a significant role in practicing sport psychology. In certain cases, simplicity can be the correct choice of judgment. However, there is a danger that it can create a slippery slope that could potentially lead to breaches in confidentiality or other ethical considerations. It is believed that the phrase getting in the way is quite negative, because in actuality, the code of conduct and ethics remind qualified psychologists of what they worked for and the values they have sworn to upkeep throughout the duration of their practice, however long it shall be. Thank you very much, Cameron.
Thank you.